A whisper slithered through the desperate crowd gathered outside the imposing gates of the Shen estate. A fevered litany of myth and money. 200 women, every month. A woman murmured, clutching her registration ticket. All born at the yin hour. He's looking for the one with glowing blood. A living treasure. Another scoffed, though her eyes held a glint of hope. They say Master Shen is cursed, poisoned. Only this miracle blood can save him. Zhang Zike stood at the fringe of the throng, the words washing over her like a tide of bitter fantasy. In her pocket, her fingers traced the creased edges of a worn photograph. Her father, his face thin and pale in a hospital bed, a ghost of a smile on his lips. The medical bills were a mountain, and she was at the bottom, with no way to climb. The rumors sounded like a madman's fairy tale, but the promise of payment was real. A siren's call to the drowning. Her secret, a strange and frightening anomaly she had hidden her entire life, felt less like a curse today and more like a splinter of impossible hope. Taking a shuddering breath, she pushed through the crowd. The air grew tense as she neared the polished iron gates, flanked by guards in sharp, black suits. Their faces were granite, their posture a silent threat. Before she could even speak, a man with slick-back hair and a sneer permanently etched onto his face stepped forward. Manager Wong. "And what do you want?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain as he eyed her simple, washed-out clothes. "I'm here for the blood test," ZK said, her voice small but firm. Manager Wong let out a short, ugly laugh. "Look at you. We are looking for candidates, not beggars smelling of poverty. Get lost before I have you thrown out." He spat the words like venom. "A stinking beggar like you could carry 100 diseases. You'd probably kill Master Shen just by breathing near him." Humiliation burned hot in her cheeks. She was dismissed, not even worthy of a number. As she stumbled back, her gaze lifted past the gates, toward the main house. Through the tinted glass of a second-floor window, she saw him. Master Shen. He was a spectre, a figure of porcelain skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones. Even from this distance, she could see the profound illness that clung to him, a chilling aura of decay that even wealth couldn't hide. His eyes, like chips of obsidian, swept over the crowd below with a glacial indifference. His mind clearly leagues away, lost in his singular, desperate hunt for a cure. He didn't see her. He didn't see any of them as people, only as potential vials of medicine. The sky, which had been a sullen grey, finally broke. Rain began to fall, first as a whisper, then as a torrential downpour, scattering the crowd of hopefuls like startled birds. Defeated, ZK turned away from the mocking fortress of the Shen estate and trudged into the labyrinthine alleys, the cold rain plastering her thin hair to her scalp. She sought shelter under a rusted awning, her body shivering. As she pushed a pile of wet refuse aside to make room, her hands scraped against a jagged piece of scrap metal hidden in the debris. She hissed in pain, pulling her hand back. A thin line of red welled up on her palm. A single drop fell, landing in a murky puddle on the glistening asphalt. For a breathtaking instant, the water ignited. An ethereal, phosphorescent turquoise light pulsed from the point of impact. A dying star in the grimy water. It was a faint, fleeting miracle, gone in a second, but it was not unseen. From his window, Shanahan's vacant gaze had been following the rain. His eyes, trained to seek any anomaly, caught the impossible flicker of light in the alley below. The indifference shattered. A predatory stillness seized him, his body leaning forward, his focus narrowing on the lone figure huddled in the shadows. The light was gone, but the girl remained. ZK wrapped a torn piece of fabric from her hem around the cut, her heart pounding with the familiar fear of discovery. Before she could process what had happened, shadows detached themselves from the deeper darkness of the alley. 3 men, their grins leering and predatory, blocked her only exit. The stench of cheap liquor and menace filled the air. "Well, look what we have here," the leader sneered, his eyes roaming over her. A little kitten lost in the rain. Panic seized her. Her father's face flashed in her mind. She would not be a victim. She grabbed a loose pipe from the ground, holding it like a club. "Stay away," she yelled, her voice trembling but defiant. "I can fight." She swung wildly. But they laughed, easily dodging her clumsy attack. One grabbed the pipe while another seized her arms from behind, his grip like iron. She struggled, kicking and screaming. But their combined strength quickly overwhelmed her. Then, as if materializing from the rain itself, a figure stood at the mouth of the alley. Tall, imposing, and radiating an aura of cold authority that dwarfed a thug's cheap bravado. It was Master Shen. Behind him, his guards moved with the brutal efficiency of trained wolves. There were no negotiations, no warnings, just a blur of swift, orchestrated violence. The sounds were sickening dull thuds, a choked gasp, the crack of bone. Within seconds, the three men were unconscious, crumpled heaps on the wet ground. The world fell silent, save for the drumming of the rain. Shanahan walked toward her, his steps measured and soundless. As he drew closer, a strange thing happened. The relentless, gnawing pain that was his constant companion, a fire of the poison that circulated through his veins, began to recede. A soothing coolness, like a gentle balm, emanated from her presence, quieting a storm inside him. It was a relief so profound it almost brought him to his knees. He stopped before her, his gaunt face pale in the neon-bled gloom. His dark eyes, no longer distant, burned into hers with an unnerving intensity. Seeing not a beggar, but a lifeline. He already knew her name. His people were that efficient. His voice, when he spoke, was a low, hoarse rasp, rough with disuse and illness. Yet it carried an unbreakable weight of command. "Chung ZK," he stated, not as a question, but as a declaration. "Come back to the Shen family with me to marry me." He saw the shock and disbelief warring on her face and added the final, crushing weight to his offer. "I will give you 100 million yuan. The marriage contract was signed. The bank transfer confirmed. 100 million yuan. The price of her father's life, and the cost of her own." Zhang Zk stood on a silk cobus and rug in Master Shen's estate. Her sprawling mansion, so vast and silent it felt more like a museum than a home. The air, chilled to a precise temperature, carried the scent of expensive lilac and polished mahogany. It was the scent of a gilded cage, relief wild with a suffocating dread in her chest. She was Madame Shen now, a title that felt like a costume she was forced to wear. But at least her father would get the surgery he desperately needed. Her future was a blank, terrifying canvas, and the man whose name she now carried was a ghost in his own house, a spectre of illness and ice. Restless, she wandered through corridors lined with priceless art, each painting a silent, judging eye. She was searching for something, anything, to make this place feel real. Her steps faltered near a study, ere the door was slightly ajar. Muffled voices, clinical and sharp, drifted out. The final transference is the most critical stage. A voice she recognized as Dr. Chen said, low and conspiratorial. Her unique blood acts as the perfect vessel. It will absorb every trace of the toxin from Master Shen's system. Manager Wang's reply was clipped, devoid of emotion. And her body, can it withstand the purification? A chilling pause. No, the process is absolute. To cleanse him, the vessel must be disposed of. It's a complete exchange. Her life for his. ZK's blood ran cold. Vessel. Transference. Disposed of. The words were sterile, medical, but their meaning was a blade twisting in her gut. She backed away, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gas. The lilac in the hallway suddenly smelled funereal. They weren't just using her blood, they were planning to drain her life. The marriage wasn't a contract. It was a death sentence. A desperate, defiant spark ignited within her. She would not be a passive vessel. She was his wife. And she would try to be a real one. She would prove she was more than a living medicine bag. In the state-of-the-art kitchen, she found ingredients for a traditional tonic soup, her hands moving with the familiar, comforting rhythm of a ritual learned at her mother's side. She simmered rare herbs for hours, pouring her fear, her hope, and her stubborn will into the fragrant broth. This was not a cure from her lab. It was a prayer from the heart. She carried the delicate porcelain bowl to Master Shen's chambers. He was silhouetted against a floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the manicured darkness of his gardens. His frame was thin, his presence immense. "Master Shen," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I made you some soup. It's good for your recovery." He didn't turn. His reflection in the glass was a mask of cold indifference. "There's no need to flatter me," he said, his voice a low rasp, sharp as broken glass. "You have been paid. Just fulfill your duties as Madame Shen." The bowl felt heavy in her hands, the warmth of it a mockery of his glacial dismissal. Her duties, her purpose was to be a living, breathing component in his cure, nothing more. As she retreated, her heart a leaden weight, she saw Manager Wang enter the room, bowing slightly to Master Shen. "Sir." "About the final arrangements," Wang said, his tone deferential. "Dr. Chen advises we prepare everything in advance to avoid complications. A fine coffin has been selected for her. The best rosewood." ZK froze in the shadows of the hallway, her breath catching in her throat. "For her." Shenihan, distracted by a wave of pain that tightened his jaw, gave a curt, dismissive nod. To him, it was just another logistical detail handled by his efficient assistant, perhaps for a distant relative or a corporate matter. He didn't know the full, fatal truth of the cure. But to ZK, his indifferent assent was the final nail. They were already choosing her coffin. She fled. She had to see her father. On the way, she stopped at a renowned apothecary, her mind racing. Taking nearly all the dowry money, 90 million yuan, she purchased to exquisite millennium ginseng roots, ancient and potent. If they wanted her life, she would first spend their money to secure her father's. The sterile white walls of the hospital ward were a harsh contrast to the Shen estate's opulence. But the quiet peace she sought was shattered. Two brutish men cornered her frail father in his bed, their voices dripping with menace. The reek of stale cigarettes and cheap liquor filled the air. "The interest has doubled, old man," one of them snarled, shaking a sheaf of papers in his face. 20 million. "Now, please," her father rasped, his face pale with fear. "My daughter, she will pay you." The leader, a man with a jagged scar across his eyebrow, turned his predatory gaze to ZK. He appraised her from head to toe, a lecherous smirk spreading across his face. "Oh, the daughter's here. Good." He lunged, grabbing her arm in a crushing grip. "Since you can't pay with cash, you'll pay off the debt with your body." Panic clawed at her throat, but fury gave her strength. "Let go of me, I am Master Shen's wife." The man and his crony roared with laughter, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the quiet ward. "Master Shen, you think a piece of trash like you could marry into the Shen family? You must be dreaming." He yanked her closer, his foul breath washing over her face. "Stop lying and be a good girl." Just as he raised a hand to strike her, the sterile hallway was flooded with blindingly bright light. The deep, powerful purr of a high-end engine culminated in a sharp screech of tires just outside the entrance. The door to the ward swung open. Shenihan stood there, a figure carved from ice and shadow. Though weakened by his illness, his presence radiated an authority so absolute it sucked the air from the room. Before the debt collectors could even react, two guards in sleek black suits moved with silent, brutal efficiency, subduing them with precise, painful strikes. The scar-faced leader stared in disbelief as Master Shen walked slowly toward him, his dark eyes burning with a cold fire ZK had never seen before. He stopped directly in front of her, placing himself between her and the cowering thug. His gaze swept over her disheveled state, the red marks on her arm, and his expression hardened into something lethal. He looked at the debt collector on the floor, his voice dangerously soft. "She's my woman." Or words hung in the air, a declaration and a death sentence. Without another word, he delivered a vicious kick to the man's ribs, a sickening crack echoing through the ward. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution of authority, a punishment so swift and merciless it left no doubt about who held the power. ZK could only stare, breathless, at this cold, formidable man who had just claimed her in a storm of chilling fury. The air in the Shen ancestral hall was thick and still, heavy with the scent of aged sandalwood and cold reverence. Rows of lacquered black tablets, each bearing a name etched in gold, stared down from their tiered altars like a silent jury. Zhang Zike knelt on a silk cushion, her back straight, her hands clasped in a gesture of pure sincerity. She wasn't praying to their ancestors for their blessing. She was praying for the life of their descendant. Let him be well, she thought, her eyes closed tight. Let the pain leave him. Whatever this contract is, whatever I am to him, please just let him be free from his suffering. A sharp, saccharine voice sliced through the solemnity. Well, look what the stray cat dragged in. ZK's eyes flew open. Liu Jiao stood framed in the ornate doorway, a vision in Chanel tweed. Her perfectly painted lips curled into a sneer of contempt. She glided into the hall, her heels clicking an arrogant rhythm on the polished marble. "I'm surprised they let someone of your background into a sacred place like this. Aren't you afraid of tainting the family's fortune with your presence?" Before ZK could form a response, Liu Jiao feigned a gasp of theatrical shock. "Oh, I see. You're not just trespassing, you're trying to seduce him even in death's shadow, worming your way into the family's very soul." With a swift, almost imperceptible movement, Liu Jiao's arm brushed against the edge of the lower altar. Clack, clack, crack. 3 ancestral tablets tumbled to the floor, one splitting cleanly in 2. The sound was a gunshot in the hallowed silence. Liu Jiao shrieked, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at ZK. "She did it. She knocked them over. It's a curse. This commoner is cursing Master Shen. She wants him to die so she can inherit everything." The commotion brought guards rushing in, followed by Master Shen's stepmother, Madame Yu, her face a mask of cold fury. She surveyed the scene, the fallen tablets, a cowering ZK, and a distraught Liu Jiao being comforted by a maid. Her case settled on ZK with the chilling finality of a judge passing sentence. "An offense against the ancestors requires a blood price," Madame Yu declared, her voice devoid of any warmth. "She used her hands to commit sacrilege, and her face to bewitch my son. Guards, maim her hands first, then scar her face. Let the ancestors see that we have punished the transgressor." Terror, cold and absolute, seized CK. The guards advanced, their expressions grim and resolute. She scrambled backward, her hands scraping against the cold floor, her mind screaming, this was it. This was how her life was ruined. Based on a lie, in a place she had entered only with a prayer in her heart. "Stop!" The voice was not loud, but it cut through the room with the authority of a blade. Every head turned. Shenihan stood in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame, his face pale and slick with a feverish sweat. But his eyes burned with a dark, terrifying fire. He pushed himself upright and walked, each step deliberate and heavy, until he stood between the guards and ZK. He shielded her completely with his body. "Who?" he began, his voice dangerously low. "Gave you the authority to harm my wife?" Madame Yu bristled. Shenihan, She desecrated the ancestral hall. She must be punished. Your son is ill, Han. Lu Jiao sobbed, clutching her arm. This witch has clouded your judgment. Shenihan didn't even look at them. His gaze was fixed on the head guard. Touch one hair on her head, he warned, and I will personally dismantle your entire family, piece by piece. Is that understood? The guard paled and took a sharp step back. Shenihan then turned slowly, his fiery gaze sweeping over his stepmother and the woman he'd once called a friend. From this moment on, Lu Jiao, you are no longer welcome in this house or in my life. The Shen Group's partnership with your family is terminated. As for you, he said, turning to a stern Madame Yu, your management rights and shares in all subsidiary companies are hereby revoked. Everything you control, everything she has ever been given, he made a sweeping gesture, is transferred to my wife, Zhang Zk. Effective immediately. He swayed, a tremor running through his frame. CK, still on the floor behind him, watched in stunned disbelief. He was defending her, not as a tool, not as a blood bag, but as his wife. The ferocity, the absolute finality of his words, sent a strange, confusing warmth blooming in her chest. A tiny flicker of impossible hope amidst the terror, then she saw it. The unbearable heat he was trying to hide. A violent shiver racked his body, and his hand flew to his chest, clutching the fabric of his shirt as if to keep his heart from bursting. The venom was flaring, triggered by the intense confrontation. His legs buckled. Master Shen, ZK cry, scrambling to support him. He pushed her gently away, his jaw clenched against a wave of agony. Get Dr. Chen, he rasped to a guard. Now. The sterile white walls of the private clinic in the Shen estate felt a world away from the oppressive incense of the ancestral hall. Shenihan sat on the edge of a medical bed, his shirt unbuttoned, his breathing shallow and ragged. Dr. Chen, a man aged by the secrets he kept, finished checking his vitals, his expression grim. The emotional outburst accelerated the venom's activity, the doctor stated gravely. It's feeding on your life force at an alarming rate. Forget me. Shenihan cut in, his voice strained but firm. I didn't call you here for a diagnosis I already know. I called you for a solution. For her. He looked Dr. Chen straight in the eye, his gaze unwavering. The cure, the final step, it kills her, doesn't it? Dr. Chen's shoulders slumped in weary confession. Her glowing blood is unique. It can absorb the venom, drawing it out of you. That her body cannot neutralize it. The poison would simply consume her from within. Her life force for yours. That was the original design. A muscle feathered in Shenihan's jaw. He had suspected, but hearing it confirmed felt like swallowing glass. The cruelty of it, the cold calculation. I had placed this innocent girl on a sacrificial altar for his sake, filled him with a black rage. There must be another way, Shenihan demanded, a way to save her. I don't care about the cost. Dr. Chen hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. There is one theoretical method, a dangerous, almost mythical one, to neutralize the toxins in her system after they are absorbed. A powerful harmonizing agent would be needed, an agent that shares your bloodline but possesses an opposing, purify energy. He looked up, his eyes filled with dread. The only source for such an agent is your own heart's blood, extracted directly while you live. What would it do to me? Drawing blood from the heart is profoundly draining. In your current state, it would cripple your life force, likely shortening what little time you have left to mere weeks, or even days, without a single moment of hesitation. Shenihan looked at the doctor, his eyes clear and resolute. A life spent in pain and isolation was worthless. That her life innocent and vibrant was not a price he was willing to let anyone pay. Do it, he commanded. Prepare the extraction. As Dr. Chen assembled a formidable-looking needle and a series of sterile vials, Shanahan leaned his head back against the wall, closing his eyes. Pain was an old companion. This would just be a different shade of it. A short, sharp agony for her continued existence. It was the easiest decision he had ever made. Miles away, in the main residence's kitchen, CK carefully ladled a steaming, fragrant tonic into a porcelain bowl. She had heard he was resting after the episode. She stirred the soup, a blend of rare herbs meant to soothe and strengthen. A small, hopeful smile touched her lips. She would help him get better. She would take care of him. He had stood up for her. He had protected her. She couldn't understand why, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she wanted him to live. A fine porcelain teacup shattered against the wall of Dr. Chen's private office, its dust settling on the polished mahogany of Liu Zhao's desk. Her fury was a silent, cold thing. News of Master Shen's sacrifice extracting his own precious heart's blood to save Zhong Zk from a minor injury had reached her, and it was an intolerable insult. His life was meant to be preserved, not squandered on a disposable cure. He is a fool, she hissed, her voice dangerously low. She turned to Dr. Shen's young, ambitious apprentice, who stood trembling by the door. A heavy silk pouch landed on the table between them with a dull thud. The harmony incense for tonight's ritual. I trust you know what to do. The apprentice's eyes darted from the pouch to Liu Zhao's venomous gaze. He nodded, greed warring with fear. The ingredients are almost identical. A potent aphrodisiac, but with none of the protective resonance. The toxins will transfer, but her spirit will not survive the exchange. See that it is done, Liu Zhao commanded, turning to look out the window, dismissing him. The plan was in motion. Tonight, the moon would be full, and the girl with the glowing blood would fulfill her one and only purpose: to die. Back at the Shen estate, ZK watched Master Shen from across the vast living room. He sat by the window, bathed in the soft afternoon light. Yet he seemed to absorb none of his warmth. His complexion, always pale, now held a translucent, almost ghostly quality. When he raised a hand to his temple, a slight tremor ran through his fingers. She frowned, a knot of worrying tightening in her stomach. She knew his illness was severe, a constant drain on his vitality. But this was different. This was a profound, bone-deep exhaustion she had never seen in him before. She was oblivious to the fact that the life force he had expended was for her. Later, a nervous apprentice from Dr. Chen's clinic arrived, bowing low as he presented a lacquered box to Manager Wong. The spirit resonance incense, as requested by the master, he announced, his voice a little too loud. It will ensure the harmony of tonight's procedure. Manager Wong, ever diligent, inspected the seal and nodded, his expression grim. He had his own reservations about the ancient cure, but his loyalty to Master Shen was absolute. He accepted the box, unknowingly holding the instrument of CK's doom, and sealed her fate with a simple nod of gratitude. Night fell, and the full moon ascended, casting a silver, ethereal glow over the estate. The bedroom was an opulent cage, draped in silks and smelling faintly of sandalwood and jasmine. CK sat on the edge of the enormous bed, the icy silk of her nightgown doing little to calm the frantic beating of her heart. Shanahan stood a few feet away, his back to her, his posture rigid. They had been in this position before, on the precipice of the consummation their contract demanded. But he always stopped. He would touch her, a spark would ignite, and then he would pull away as if burned, his eyes shadowed with a conflict she could not comprehend. Do you dislike me? Her voice was barely a whisper, fragile in the heavy silence. Why do you always stop at this moment? He turned, and the anguish in his eyes struck her dumb. It wasn't disdain or disgust, it was pain. It is not you, ZK, he said, his voice strained. It is complicated. He offered no further explanation, instead moving to a small adjoining study to retrieve something, leaving her alone with her spiraling thoughts. Hurt and confusion warred within her. Was I not beautiful enough? Was I so repulsive to him? Humiliation burned her cheeks. While he was gone, she snatched her phone from the bedside table, her fingers flying across the screen. Husband, physical condition, she typed. Then, feeling a fresh wave of shame, reasons for lack of passion in marriage. The clinical, impersonal articles offered no comfort, only deepening her sense of inadequacy. When he returned, he was holding a small, ornate incense burner and the lacquered box from the clinic. He didn't meet her gaze as he carefully lit the cone of incense. He believed it was the harmony incense, a sacred bomb crafted to protect her soul during the transfer. A desperate countermeasure he had devised. A sweet, cawing fragrance began to fill the room, fake and unnaturally seductive. It was the scent of betrayal. Needing a moment to compose herself, CK slipped out into the corridor under the pretense of getting a glass of water. Two maids were tidying a linen cart nearby, their voices low and careless. "It's a pity, isn't it?" one murmured, folding a towel with practiced ease. "So young and pretty, but the old texts are clear. To purge the poison, the vessel must be broken," the other maid sighed, her expression a mixture of pity and morbid acceptance. "The young bride in her prime must perish for the master to live. It is her fate. At least her family will be well compensated." The words struck ZK like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Perish, broken, fate. The vague fears that had haunted her coalesced into a single, horrific certainty. This wasn't a cure. It was a sacrifice. A sacrifice. The first maid then added something that shattered CK's world completely. Still, for Master Shen to go so far, risking his life to make that protective incense with his own heart's blood, all to keep you safe just a little longer, he must truly care for you. The world tilted on its axis. Heart's blood, to keep you safe. Suddenly, everything made a terrible, heartbreaking sense. His weakness, his paleness, the tremor in his hands, his hesitation in the bedroom, the agony in his eyes every time he pulled away from her. It wasn't rejection, it was protection. He wasn't pushing her away out of dislike. He was trying to save her life, even as he was bound by tradition to take it. He loved her. This cold, distant man loved her enough to defy a centuries-old curse and tear himself apart from the inside out. And now, inside that room, the false incense burned, its deadly perfume a ticking clock. She looked back at the closed door, the sweet scent now smelling of death. She couldn't let him do it. She couldn't let his love, his incredible, painful sacrifice, be the very thing that killed her. Overwhelmed by love and terror, ZK turned and fled, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor, running not from him, but for him. The world returned to Shanahan in a wave of unbearable fire. Not the familiar, creeping cold of the poison, but a searing agony that felt like every vein was being filled with molten glass. He gasped, his body arching off the sterile bed in Dr. Chen's clinic. The incense, it was wrong. A sharp, cawing sweetness lingered in the air, a scent of betrayal. His eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused, scanning the room. The treatment apparatus was overturned, and the small cot where Zhong ZK should have been resting was empty. ZK. His voice was a raw, broken thing, a shard of his usual command. A groan came from the corner of the room. Dr. Chen staggered to his feet, clutching his head, a dark bruise purpling his temple. Master Shen Shi Lu Jiao. The name struck Shanahan with the force of a physical blow. "What about Lu Jiao?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a lethally low growl. "She was here," Dr. Chen rasped, shame and pain warring in his expression. "She ambushed me, Swap the incense. The one she used, it doesn't soothe the venom. It agitates it. Draws it out. She took ZK by force. I tried to stop her, but he gestured helplessly at his own battered state. She said she was taking her to a place where her blood could finally be used properly. Master Shen, I don't know where she is. A chilling stillness descended upon Shenihan. The fire in his veins was nothing compared to the glacial rage icing his heart. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the tremor in his limbs and the white-hot torment that threatened to buckle his knees. His gaze was terrifyingly calm. He pulled out his phone, his thumb moving with practiced efficiency. "Fine, Lu Jiao," he spoke into the device, his voice void of all emotion. "Deploy every asset. Check every property she owns, every contact she has, every shadow she might hide in. I want Zhong ZK found." He paused, the silence amplifying the menace in his next words. "You have 10 minutes, or I will dismantle this entire city to find her myself." While a storm of men and technology was unleashed upon the city, ZK awoke to a different kind of hell. The damp, musty smell of decay filled her lungs. She was tied to a cold metal chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse, a throbbing ache radiating from her head, and a sharp, stinging pain in her arm where Liu Zhao's thugs had manhandled her. Liu Zhao stood before her, admiring a long, gleaming silver needle. The triumphant, unhinged smile on her face was more terrifying than any weapon. "Awake, little savior," she cooed. "Good. I want you to be fully conscious for this." "Liu Zhao, why?" ZK's voice was weak, her body shivering. Liu Zhao laughed, a high, brittle sound that echoed in the cavernous space. "Why? Because you're an impurity. A footnote. You think he loves you." She gestured dismissively. "He is bound to me by a lifetime of shared memories. You are just a temporary cure, a walking blood bag he pities. I'm simply expediting the process." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I even swapped the incense. The one I used makes the poison in his blood so much more potent. When he comes for Yuan, he'll be weak, desperate, and then he will see me, his true salvation, after I've extracted every last drop of your precious blood." The confession hung in the air, each word a piece of a puzzle ZK hadn't even known she was solving. It wasn't just about the cure. It was about her death. The heart's blood method Dr. Shen had nervously mentioned. The one Shenihan had so furiously rejected, it was real. And it required her life. In the horrifying moment of clarity, everything replayed in her mind. Shenihan shielding her from a speeding car. Shenihan taking a knife for her. Shenihan sucking the snake venom from her leg. Poisoning himself to save her. He hadn't just been protecting his cure. He had been protecting her. His repeated warnings, his fierce possessiveness, his desperate, unspoken pleas in his eyes. It was never about the contract. It was love, a profound, sacrificial love she had been too blind and too hurt to see. A wave of regret, so powerful it eclipsed her fear, washed over her. She had misunderstood him, pushed him away, doubted the one person who was willing to lay down his life for her. Now, as Liu Zhao raised the needle, its tip glinting under the dim light, all she wished for was one last chance. One more moment to look into his eyes and tell him she finally understood. Just as the needle was about to pierce her skin, a world outside exploded. The screech of tires on asphalt ripped through the night, followed by the shattering of glass. The warehouse doors burst inward, ripped from the hinges. Headlights flooded the space, silhouetting a dozen figures moving with silent, deadly precision. Liu Zhao's hired thugs were dispatched in a blur of motion, collapsing without a sound. And then he was there. Shenihan stood in the doorway, a figure carved from fury and shadow. The agonizing venom was a visible storm in his eyes, but it was dwarfed by the tempest of his rage. He didn't look at Liu Zhao. His entire being was focused on the broken figure in the chair. He moved like a whirlwind, each step covering an impossible distance. When Liu Zhao's last remaining guard lunged at him, Shanahan didn't even break stride, his arm lashing out in a single, brutal movement that sent the man flying. He finally stopped before Liu Zhao, his presence a suffocating force. He looked at her then, and the cold indifference in his eyes was worse than any hatred. "You touched her," he stated, the words flat and heavy with a promise of ruin. Ignoring Liu Zhao's terrified stammering, he swept past her and knelt before ZK, his rage vanished, replaced by an expression of such raw anguish it stole her breath. With hands that were surprisingly gentle, he tore away her restraints. He lifted her into his arms as if she were made of fragile glass, her barely conscious head slumping against his chest. Her blood stained his pristine shirt, a crimson flower blooming over his heart. He held her tight, his face etched with a desperate, all-consuming concern as he carried her out into the night. The harsh, sterile white of the hospital was a stark contrast to the darkness of the warehouse. Dr. Chen, his face grim, held up a tablet displaying a complex medical scan. "Master Shen, her condition is critical. Liu Zhao's tampering with the incense created a violent resonance between your poison and her blood's energy. It's tearing her apart from the inside. She's fallen into a coma and her vital signs are failing." Shanahan's gaze never left CK's still, pale-faced through the glass of the ICU. "What's the solution, Doctor?" Chen hesitated, his throat working. "There is only one way to neutralize the chaotic energy now. It requires a direct infusion using the original heart's blood method. We would have to perform another extraction from you. But with the poison in your system so violently agitated, the risk to you is 10 times what it was before. Master Shen, it will very likely kill you." The air grew heavy with the weight of the pronouncement. It was the ultimate choice, his life for hers. Without a single moment of hesitation, Shanahan turned his head slightly, his eyes, dark pools of unwavering resolve, meeting the doctor's in the reflection on the glass. "Then proceed."